Before the events of this sunny Friday morning of August the 7th, 1998, that shook the country to the core, Kenyans had never witnessed an incident of such a magnitude. It was all hands on deck as government agencies raced against time to rescue hundreds of people stuck under the rubble of the Ufundi building that had crumbled into a pile of rubble within minutes of a terror attack.
Lives are precious.
Mr. President.
And I've said many times that all of us are members of human race. Why should we go against one another?
The country then was not really well prepared in terms of responding to a phenomenon of such magnitude. And we actually had to get assistance from international communities. I do remember then General retired George Agoi, who was the lead commander of that operation. He presented several challenges that the country faced in trying to assist victims of that collapse at the time. Therefore, this gave an impetus for the country to be able to come up with an outfit that can be able to be of impact to the community.
Even then, the country depended on experts from nations like Israel and the United States to aid in the rescue mission of that day.
2 years after the horrific attack on Kenyans, efforts to reduce their vulnerability to other disasters have been on paper and have not been translated into action.
The country had barely picked up the pieces when another tragedy struck, this time not agents of terror but greed and bad workmanship. A building in Nyamakima off Ronald Ngala Street in downtown Nairobi coming tumbling down only to find the country once again unprepared.
We rarely experience natural phenomenon, of the magnitude of seismic activities like earthquakes, earth tremors, hurricanes. We don't often experience that in the country. But still, we see that there are so many structures. Average in a year, we get incidences ranging between 5 to 10, building collapsing, mainly in the urban setting. That is the cities, Nairobi in particular, and its environs, rather surrounding counties, that is Kiambu, Kajiado, Machakos, and so forth. So I connect these occurrences due to, human factors.
More than 2 decades since the country's first major disaster, many more lives have been lost and people maimed because of poorly constructed buildings that collapse.
Hii mguu yangu kuna venye ilikuwa imevunjika ndani mpaka ikawa imeshona, hata nilikuwa natembea na Crocs hizo. So kitambo ni nurse nipone na bado niko na familia nafaa iendelee, haijakuwa rahisi.
By the time the country was being hit by a gruesome tragedy in the middle of the long rain season in 2016, Kenya had made significant steps in emergency response, with the Military Disaster Response Battalion having been in existence for 5 years prior to that occurrence.
I must say that the roadmap to where we are has been quite eventful, and we have had about 7 commanding officers. I'm the 7th commanding officers currently. So my predecessors, of course, did their bit to be able to establish and build the capacity of the unit to where we are currently. So it began as a small entity, which we referred to as the training nucleus of the KDF, that was primarily mandated to train other KDF personnel in being ready to respond to emergencies whenever called upon.
The collapse of a residential building in Huruma Estate brought to the attention of the role of the Kenya's military in emergency response in the country.
And being a KDF unit, we normally get our instructions from Defense Headquarters. So in Defense Headquarters, we have various dockets. One of them is operation. Operation docket is where we fall in. And any communication normally comes from the operation docket that normally put us to activation mode. That is, there is something happened in sector A or sector B or area A or C. And then when we never get that call, we mobilize ourselves. Within 15 minutes, we are supposed to be, out and moving.
Several were rescued alive at that Huruma accident, like Maureen and her 2 children, one of whom was just a baby she held in her arms at the time of the collapse. Her sister-in-law, who was with her, also survived, but her husband, who had initially thought it was all a prank, died in that accident.
In fact, yeye aliokolewa kutoka kwa hizo nini. The last day walikuwa wamesema wanafunga operation. Ya hapo ndiyo alipatikana akiwa amekufa.
The Disaster Response Battalion was formed in 2007 as a unit that responded to emergencies of such a nature. Its initial officers had trained in the Americas, parts of Europe and the Middle East to be acquainted with how to tackle special circumstances when disaster strikes.
So the unit being formed was quite timely and quite necessary. But it does not really mean that, therefore, we should be always on toes, up and down, responding to emergencies of such nature. Those which are occasioned out of natural causes, a natural phenomenon, it's okay. But there are those which are avoidable. We normally call those as human-induced emergencies.
Now based at the Embakasi Garrison, the unit is a full-fledged battalion able to tackle different kinds of emergencies and able to respond and coordinate with other units.
A small entity was about 24 men who undertook training in Israel, specifically on urban search and rescue. But thereafter, we have been able to also, welcome support from other international states. If I may mention, the United States of America came in quite handy, and the Czech Republic, who gave the men and women in the unit some competency training areas in the field of hazardous material management.
The 24 pioneer soldiers of the unit trained in Israel and came home to set up shop, and soon enough what began as an operation to aid the soldier fraternity to be emergency ready soon stretched into a fully fledged emergency response component. For both the emergency responders and the victims of a disaster attack, every second counts, and each moment after that emergency occurs is quite critical for especially those who have come to rescue the victims.
The first 1 hour of an emergency is always very critical because it's a time where majority of the victims get rescued. And who do this? It is the community themselves because they know the environment better. They understand it well. They know where their colleagues, their relatives, their friends, have fallen victims of that emergency, and therefore they are best positioned to be able to assist and even leverage the information to the responding agencies.
There is no disaster site that is perfect. Despite the training that we undertake, when we go for disaster rescue operations, we ought to conform to the scenario on the ground. But the basics that we acquire are the ones that drive us to undertake those operations. I'm out of fist!
Following a disaster, residents often arrive at the scene first. Many use their bare hands to pick through the stone and other material to get to the victims.
Tuliambiwa hii nyumba iko na crack na sisi tukapuuza tu. Huyu contractor akatuambia niendeleeni na kazi, hakuna kitu inaweza happen.
Sasa kutoka nje tulikuwa na hivi. Kutoka nje hivi tukasikia watu wanapiga ndelo. Hiyo nyumba huku ilikwenda kuja hivi sasa. Sisi tulikuwa pande huko. Sisi tulikuwa tumeshatoka huko upande huko. Tukatorekea huko nyuma. Kama huko nayo kukaa inaanguka sasa. Tukashindwa tuende wapi na tuanzie wapi.
While this is laudable, emergency response teams have on several occasions removed all non-trained experts from the site, much to the annoyance of the crowds.
Tukanjitolea raia tukatoa mawe na tuliokoa watu, tuliokoa uhai. Sasa unaona ambulance ndio zinakuja, sijui za moto, hakuna tingatinga inaokoa watu na mnatufukuza huku, wengine wakikufia kule ndani. Kuna wasichana walikuwa wameleta chai, nasikia wanapiga simu tu. Wanalia, tuokoeni, tuko mahali tumelaliwa. Na demo hii nyumba inakaa tu hivyo tu imenyamaza, ndivyo watu wanaendelea kukufa sababu hakuna nini? Hakuna hewa.
Sasa niambie kuanzia saa 8, kwani tingatinga inatoka wapi? Si tingatinga iko within Nairobi County. Kama hizi ambulance zote zimekuja, mbona tingatinga isikuje? Kama mtu alifaa kuokolewa, hii muda yote kama ni kukufa si amekufa.
Na request kama Nairobi. Nairobi inastahili kuwe kila ward ikuwe na emergency car. Kwa sababu kiti inafanyika kutoka saa 8, saa 4 saa 11, hakuna kiti imefanyika. Juzi tumekuwa na moto imechoma nyumba zimechomeka hapa Maji Mazuri. Kari inakuja sima moto pata 3 hours, pata wananchi kuingilia ndio wakasima moto. Saa hii magari zimekuja hapa wamesimama kila mkubwa akapa na hakuna kitu inaendelea.
This usually elicits mixed emotions for family members seeking to find out the status of their loved ones.
Brother yangu wanafanya kazi hapa, sijui walikuwa kwa nyumba gani, juu waliamka wanafanya na kina hawa. Sasa hakuna simu inaenda, nimepiga simu kama haijaenda, siwezi kubalishwa niende nijue kama alikuja kwa hii mjengo.
Emergency responders have sought to explain the reasoning behind this move.
We must also conduct what we call scene assessment. The scene assessment is very important because you'll be able to know the details on the ground, the correct information on the ground. You also be able to know the number of the victim that you are dealing with on the ground.
And then coming up with methodological procedures on how to start up to the finish.
Once disaster strikes, the rush to rescue victims alive is an intense one, with family members seeking answers from disaster response teams at every available moment.
It might take a very long time, this operation. It might take anything from 6 hours to even 2 to 3 days. So it's a very long operation. So the first most important thing is to establish if we actually do have people trapped inside. So that I think the workers, the technical team, can know how to target the operation.
The buildings of death have particularly continued to expose the country's soft underbelly in disaster response.
The search and rescue commander has requested us to allow him operate also using entries from the other side, whereby there are slabs lying on top of the river. As you have seen a few minutes ago, you saw there was one of the drilling machine and the engineer being tied a rope on waist being pulled outside. He was just hanging on top of a river.
With the crowds gathered, waiting for quick responses, they sometimes require answers as to what is happening every so often. The incident commanders step aside to give that information as and when they can. Sometimes they are the bearer of sadness for those waiting.
We don't have the figures yet as to exact number of people who are still trapped, but from the local sources is that there are 2 people who are still unaccounted for. We were able to rescue quite a number yesterday, and this morning we retrieved 1 lady alive.
We are sad to report that during the operations yesterday, we retrieved some 3 bodies, 3 female bodies of 2 female adults and 1 child.
The announcements are quite similar in many such accident sites within Nairobi and other towns in the neighboring counties. The county of Kiambu has particularly experienced numerous building disasters.
Tumewaokoa watu kadhaa, kwa bahati mbaya wengine ambao tumewaokoa hawakuweza kuishi, wamekufa.
In such gatherings, the pain of losing loved ones goes hand in hand with tough questions to the relevant authorities. More often than not, the blame games are the order of the day.
We have a very clear procedure on how approvals should be obtained when you want to construct. when you want to construct, you must have an architect, a qualified one, registered by the architect's board. You must have an engineer registered by the engineer's board. And to some extent, you also need to have a QS.
When you don't allow building inspectors to come to the premises, definitely a notice is issued that this work should stop until inspection is done. But as I'm saying, I'm not a technical person, so I cannot say what is right or what is wrong. I'm just an administrator in charge of the area.
The frequency on the building disasters brings new challenges to emergency responders who over time decry coming in to help at a moment when people are in pain that could have been avoided, and it takes a toll many a times.
For the past 1 year, we have been able to respond to about 6 emergencies of this nature, a building collapse within Nairobi County and Kiambu County. Because if we are to observe building codes and regulations that have been put in place by the county government and the national government, then we cannot be experiencing what we experience in the country for the structural failures.
They too believe that the culture of impunity should be brought to an end.
Sasa kazi yetu itafanyika kwa njia tofauti. Sisi tutahitaji mtu yeyote mwenye atakuwa kwenye mambo kama hayo. Kama umepatiwa jukumu la kuwajibika na kuhakikisha kwamba kazi kama hii haiendelei, lazima ufanye. Usipofanya utasimama pia na mwenye amefanya makosa.
The National Construction Authority has raised concerns over road contractors who bypass the use of critical experts mixed up with cutting corners when it comes to use of the industry-set materials. Even as the blame game continues, emergency responders are always preparing for duty. The Disaster Response Battalion of the Kenya Army is usually the lead emergency responder, but when the trucks are lining up to set out to the scene, a team of the 1st K9 Regiment is always part of the team.
We get an information or request to respond from the National Disaster Operations Center. I'm the one who get that information. I immediately mobilize the search and rescue technicians. We are on 24-hour standby with 15 minutes notice to move, depending on where the incident has happened. Immediately we get a request to respond. We converge, and the search and rescue technicians are ready to move. We also do it in liaison with the defense headquarters and also the points of contact at the disaster site. This gives us the initial information. As we proceed to the scene, we have some heads up. As we continue, one of the challenges that we face is the issue of traffic jams.
The unique capabilities that the K9s have create a huge difference in how fast the job gets done.
Human detection dogs are conditioned to be human friendly. Therefore, Labrador Retriever being the most recommended breed because they are non-aggressive. The handler communicates with the dog through standardized words of command. When the dog detects the presence of human life, it will indicate passively or by barking.
Hii umbwa tuseme tunaendanga rescue, tuseme building ikianguka, huwa tuna rescue wale watu wenye wako hai, wenye hawajakufa.
Some of the other capabilities that they have is cameras and trapped person locator. Once those capabilities are not able to locate trapped life and the information received from the scene size up indicates that there was or there is likely to be a trapped victim, then we employ the dogs. The military working dogs are able to identify a trapped person within less than 3 minutes.
Before the animals go into the crash or collapse site, a critical assessment is done to ensure their safety too.
Each emergency is normally different from another, you see. So you might get to an emergency where there are other secondary hazards. Secondary hazards here could be maybe there are some gas explosions or hazardous material within the same environment. So you first need to take care and mitigate that hazard first before you expose this dog. Because this dog, we treat them just like humans. So before the dog goes in, you ask yourself whether you can move in also.
The unit involves several breeds of dogs who perform specific duties in their capacity as military working dogs.
Umbwa haiku iko juu na ni friendly kwa binadamu. Na once umefunza umbwa si rahisi kusahau.
The K9 regiment engages Rottweilers for long-range surveillance and tracking, the Malinois breed for patrolling and explosives detection. The English Springer Spaniel is also a critical animal used for explosive search and detection. The Labrador Retrievers are the star of the show in building collapse scenarios. The German Shepherds are good for vehicle search, guard dogs and for protection.
The effective operation of urban search and rescue depends on a well-trained personnel coupled with tools and equipment that are maintained in a state of operational readiness at all times. The effective operation of urban search and rescue will be helped by tools and equipment that will help the team to operate in a 24-hour period and a duration of 10 days when they operate in the disaster site.
When we do the search, we normally encounter different obstacles. One of the obstacles is the wooden or the timbers that are found in the site. The other one is reinforced concrete. And the other one is reinforced steel doors or bars or iron sheet. Now, the rescuers or the responders do encounter the doors or the timbers using the power saw to cut through to gain access.
The collapse of buildings is just among the many kinds of emergencies that the unit can handle. When a fire consumes a building, the unit is prepared with a fully kitted fire truck and equipment to handle the damage.
This kind of rescue operation, the first item that we normally use is the rescue ladder. This ladder is used to access high areas because it can be hoisted up to a height of 40 feet. That is an equivalent of a 4-story building, so that you can be able, in order to reach those trapped, and you can be able to evacuate them. The next item is the rescue chute. This chute is used to rescue ambulatory victims who will be taken through a short safety brief on what they are supposed to do to descend through the chute safely. In most cases, we normally use one of the rescuers to go through the chute to assure the victims that the chute is safe to be used and they don't have anything to worry.
And we have also the airbag. We also use airbag to support the element so that once the rescuers go under the rubble, they cannot be easily injured.
When the emergency is on a hill or a cliff, the unit is trained on how best to use ropes to get to the person in need.
When we come to the issue of safety, when one of the personnel who is ascending from a cliff, the main thing that we will use is the rope. So there are different types of ropes that we usually use. Like, for example, the one that we have here is the dynamic rope. Why? The main reason is this dynamic rope, it's durable and it is strong. So within that rope, we have the belay and the safety line. So the rescuer who will now descending from the cliff will have the safety line and the belay. And within the safety line and the belay, there are some equipment that we usually use. For example, we've got the descender, we've got the carabiner, we've got the Prusik knots. So this Prusik knots is an initiative that search and rescue personnel came up with that can help the personnel to descend from the higher cliff to the bottom of the cliff to rescue the victim who has gotten injury. So when we are rigging this rope from the higher cliff, we must ensure that the safety of the victim and the safety of the rescuer is more paramount.
The Afande emergency responders are also equipped to deal with chemical emergencies. They show us how they prepare for the response and how to protect themselves in such a delicate situation.
Downrange is where the incident has taken place. So after they have been rescued from there, they are brought to the triage. Just behind me is the triage. They will be categorized according to their injuries, whereby the dead will be put at the black flag, written dead. The next one are those who will have minor injuries, which is labeled by the yellow flag, so they can take some time before they are attended to. Followed by the green flag, that is the minor injury, and they can delay a bit, so they are delayed a bit, but they will be attended to in case there is nobody in the immediate flag, that is the red one. So that categorization is done by the doctor. So at the triage, there should be a doctor, and those who have gone to respond there, those are the responders. So from there, those who need immediate attention can be taken to for immediate attention. Just on my right hand side, there's a place there that you can see. That is where those who need immediate attention are taken there. They are processed immediately. They are taken to the doctor. This immediate a place where they are supposed to be processed is erected just immediately when we reach the scene. After we reach the collection point, we set up our command post, then we make it. It will help two categories of people. That is the responders, the first responders who will go downrange, that is where the incident has taken place. In any case, they have a problem, they will be brought back and processed there. Again, if any case they find responders before erecting the mass casualty decontamination, or before the mass casualty decontamination is operational, then they are processed there. After that, we take the victims to the mass casualty decontamination. At the entrance, they are supposed to be, their clothes are supposed to be removed. And the process of removing is cutting. So they are removed all the clothes because around 90 to 95% of the contaminants are contained on the clothing. So the clothes are removed. Then that is the first step. The second step is washing. They are washed clean. Then the third step is rinsing before they are taken to monitoring section where the multi-ray and other gadgets are used. Those are monitoring equipments used to monitor whether the victim is clean or not. In any case, the victim is not clean, then he or she is supposed to be taken back for further cleaning before they proceed to the doctor and for further treatment. So the Technicon is used by the technicians who operate the mass casualty decontamination. So those who process people inside the mass casualty decontamination, after they finish their work there, they decon themselves too. And they work in twos as they work. As they work inside there, they work in pairs. So they will live in pairs, they decontaminate themselves in pairs, and then they go to the doctor too. Remember, before they start the operation, each and every one of them is supposed to pass through the doctor where the vital organs reading should be taken. After those are taken, they are recorded, and immediately they accomplish their task, they are checked again. In any case, there's a change, then they are supposed to be referred to the doctor.
And when a disaster strikes in a large water body, the officers who train very often for such moments are able to undertake the rescue without any major challenges. This lake in Kayole Estate is where they practice at least 3 times a week.
We have had successful operations, one in Kimende Dam, Masinga Dam, and one which was in Nakuru, which we recovered a chopper. Also in this dam we have recovered a victim who was trying to swim, a 21-year-old boy.
In order to make a bad situation as smooth as possible, such simulations are critical for the emergency responders to be able to bring themselves up to speed with how fast and how smoothly they need to do their job, because it is a matter of life and death in such critical scenarios. Before tackling any kind of emergency, responders must understand the problem they are dealing with first.
We have been called, depending on our capability, to go and rescue the victim as disaster response battalion. The technique we have used are tripod, gin, or modified tripod, depending on the type of soil and how the ground is to support the activity.
Good for you. Pray.
In order to keep the team disciplined and ready to undertake the mission at hand, they depend on an equally disciplined leader to keep their affairs in check.
On a normal day in Disaster Response Battalion, there is a unit program that I, as the adjutant, always ensure that it is followed and it is run as scheduled. In the morning, we normally start with master parade for accountability of personnel, and then we have morning run for physical and mental stability of our personnel. After that, there is training of urban search and rescue, hazmat, hazardous material, fire rescue and water rescue teams. They undergo various training that will enable us as a unit to enhance the generation of manpower that is used for 24-hour standby that they normally deploy when they are called upon in case of a disaster.
The military says that while it may take lead in emergency response, that duty is a joint engagement where several agencies should come together and work as one. The reliance on one unit to fix all the issues has come under sharp criticism on why the government isn't able to fully equip as many units as possible within the police and county governments for such rescues wherever they occur. Leila Mohammed, NTV.